That's perfect. Thanks, Fiona. Thanks as well to Maura, John, and all the team at the IGA for the opportunity to present this research today. I suppose, as Fiona said, I manage the Keeping the Dairy program in Moore Park, and over the last 4, 5, 6 years, we've done a lot of work in this area in terms of labour management and efficiency, and hopefully there's some ideas or some steps that we can take out of today to bring home and apply on our own farms. I suppose it's a bit ironic that we were put back a week, and ideally you talk about a lot of this stuff in December, and we'd have all of our work organisation done and be ready for spring, but hopefully we can rush home and get a few of these things implemented and make the spring that bit easier for us all. So, in terms of switching on for spring and the key, we all know it's the key and defining period of the year, but just to put a figure on it, a third of all of our workload occurs in that spring period, February, March and April. So like any alleviation or any hour, few minutes we can save during that time of year is absolutely essential in the context of the whole year. We know the issues and the challenges that are there in terms of supply and labour demand out on farms, and really what I'm going to focus on is the labour demand aspect in terms of improving efficiency, the organisation, the practices and strategies we can implement to reduce labour demand, but focusing on that from the point of view that improved demand, making our workplaces that bit more attractive, is what's going to ultimately increase supply and hopefully create enjoyable workplaces that are attractive for people to come on to, whether that's full-time, part-time or family members. So through this presentation, hopefully I'll give some insight into, I suppose, what some of the most effective farmers in terms of workload management are doing and the impact that it's having. So to give a bit of background on the topic in terms of the wider Irish workforce and I suppose the increasingly competitive environment that's there. So like what we're seeing is a lot more difficulty in terms of filling roles across the economy. So it's not just an agricultural or a dairy industry issue in terms of people and employment. So if we look at the graph here and follow the blue line, like that's the Irish economy's unemployment rate, and they're back to levels of I suppose, pre-recession. The economy's at full employment, so obviously it's going to be a lot more difficult to attract people to work on farms. Within that, I suppose them challenges, they're not just agricultural or they're not just primary industries, they are across the economy from ICT, hospitality, transport and so on. And just to contextualise it, a recent study done by Teagasc in Limerick, they indicated that over 120,000 new construction workers are needed by 2030. So like, if we put that in the context of dairy farms, we'd estimate that about 700 new people are needed in the industry every year. So whether that's replacing retiring farmers or new farm assistance managers and so on. So like about 350 or about 3,500 people needed for in our industry by 2030. So like, I suppose while our problems are like, while the need to attract people is huge, I suppose in the context of the wider economy, these issues are there for everyone. If we focus then on the current situation in terms of where we're at, in terms of workload out on farms, so like dairy farming, it is characterised by the high working hours that exist. So a recent Teagasc study showed about 55% of all dairy farmers reporting workload stress. Dairy farmers are working the highest hours of any sector of the economy, so it is worth keeping that in mind. The seasonality of the workload I've just mentioned, and we all know that the challenges that are there. And then we have got the increased herd sizes and workload that's occurred from that in the last 10 years. So about a 30% increase in workforce demand in that period. And while some of that will be offset by improvements in efficiency, it's obviously a significant addition. Finally then, we've got the challenge around, I suppose, an ageing workforce, succession planning and generational renewal, and I suppose the question of who's going to milk the cows in 10 or 20 years' time. And recent CSO statistics that have come out, they've I suppose, highlighted this challenge even further. Like if we look at the blue bars here on this graph, they're the 2023 data, the most recent data on it. What it's showing is about 4.5% of all farm holders, including all sectors. Dairy admittedly isn't as bad as I suppose some of the other sectors, but but like 4.5% of all farm holders under 35, a decrease from 6.9 just in 2020. And I suppose it I suppose begs two questions really. Like, how are we going to attract the next generation of to milk cows? And what the research is telling us in that regard is that they're looking for a lot more in terms of work-life balance, flexibility, all of them type of things. And I suppose the other big thing is around the need to attract these people, and like the onus being on, I suppose, our current farmers to showcase how attractive or the potential of farming as a career choice and dairy farming. So I suppose that's where work organisation and labour productivity enters the equation, and I suppose identifying an approach around making workplaces more attractive, particularly in spring. So in terms of that improved work organisation and productivity, obviously we're looking at all the positive effects, and they've been shown throughout the research in terms of stress, work-life balance, health and safety, workplace attractiveness and so on, and also in terms of that profitability aspect, which is huge. In terms of attractive workplaces, and these are really the 4 steps that I'm going to go through this in terms of how we can reduce our labour demand, manage our labour hopefully that bit better, and what the data has shown us. So in terms of that time allocation piece, so that's really around understanding the labour input that's going in on our farms. Where's the potential then to find where we can shave off a couple of minutes here or a couple of minutes there. Then we've got the farmer's work profile, so really focusing on, I suppose, our own workload and how that can be limited. Then looking at the strategies in terms of, say, work organisation, facilities, practices, and so on, and how they can have a positive impact. And finally, I suppose, showing the characteristics of farms with the positive workload metrics and the impact that they're seeing on their businesses in terms of attracting people, their outlook for the sector, and so on. So, this is data from a study that we did a couple of years ago around, I suppose, where the workload was going in on farms, and I suppose we divided it into the different herd size groups to see, I suppose, what time input was going in across a range of different herd sizes. Over 80 farms were involved in this study. What we found from the February to June period was that regardless of herd size, farmer work hours were similar, similarly family work hours were similar. About 60 hours per week was the average farmer workload for that period, and obviously it's contractor and hired labour then that's coming in as herd sizes are getting bigger, but no difference in terms of farmer workload as herd size is increasing. I suppose secondly, when we look at that in terms of labour efficiency and using hours per cow as our metric, it's not the most ideal metric, but when we do look at it that way, we obviously see a scale effect in terms of efficiency, but importantly within this, we see that within all of the different herd size groups, for that period of February to June, there is massive scope to have positive, I suppose, workload indicators, whether that's in terms of labour efficiency, whether it's in terms of hours worked, whether it's in terms of time off. And we'll touch on some of the systems around how that's adopted and implemented on these farms, but I suppose it's shown that regardless of herd size, the opportunity is there to do this and it can be done. When we look at the average labour input then across these farms in terms of the hours worked per day, and this is for the average farm in that study, about 130 cows, and I suppose where the time input was going in terms of different tasks. If we first take a look at the bottom line, the blue line, in terms of milking, and obviously that's the most consistent task in terms of time input. It's consuming about 1/3 of all of our labour input. So obviously that's going to be the first focus in terms of improvements if we see the need to do that. Secondly, we've got our calf care and our cow care, and these are obviously the big contributors in terms of our seasonal workload. For example, if we look at calf care alone, and in the orange line there at the bottom, like if calf care isn't there, there is no seasonal demand. That extra 2.5 hours per day. So again, any steps we can take, if we can save 10 minutes a day on our calf routine over the spring, over that 60-day period, suddenly you're saving about 60 hours over that 2-month period, which is the equivalent of a working week, we could say. So like the small incremental gains, I suppose, have the potential to have a massive impact. I suppose thirdly then, and finally on this, in terms of the blue line and looking at repairs and maintenance, and that as a task, it's accounting for about an hour a day on the average farm in that February, March and April period. And I suppose obviously there's going to be unavoidable breakdowns and challenges in that way, but I suppose it does beg the question, can some of this work maybe be offloaded to contractors or someone else? And I suppose, is there stuff we can do in the period building up to that, building up to spring, to get our equipment ready, to get the servicing done and everything else in advance? I suppose next on to our farmers' working profile and examining the different work patterns here in terms of what the best farmers were doing. In terms of this, I suppose the study gave us the potential to compare the bottom 25 and the top 25% in terms of, I suppose, our work organisation effectiveness. So different metrics in terms of finish time, working hours and all of the rest. So I suppose what the study highlighted, the big finding was around finish time and the role that played, and I suppose the importance of framing our day and building good habits, probably in most of our situations starting with a set and early finish time where we can. So like an hour and a half of a difference between the top and bottom 25% of farms in that period, again looking at it from February to June. And obviously that was having a massive knock-on effect in the length of day that these farms were working. And when we take, I suppose, dairy and competing with all of the different sectors in terms of trying to attract people in, shortening the working day is going to be a massive part of that. So how close can we get to competing with other sectors? I suppose the other big point to take away from this study was the amount of, I suppose, time spent in non-farm activity on the farms. In this case, where the top 25%, there's about 4 hours there within the working day, and that's not just breaks. I suppose it's whether it's school runs, whether it's family jobs, whether it's whatever is going on in them farms. But what it is highlighting is a massive opportunity to set ourselves as a sector in terms of the opportunity and the flexibility that's there, and the potential of that to I suppose sell the sector as something attractive for someone to come in. I suppose ultimately what it came out with in terms of hours per week was about 20 hours in the difference between the two groups of farms. Obviously a significant amount of time, the 50 hours and the 70 hours, that's before any breaks and everything else are taken, so it has the potential to rise. But it is shown with that 50 hours that there is massive scope to reduce our working hours. There's options there, and like dairying has the potential to be relatively competitive with other sectors in terms of workload. Thirdly, to touch on our work organisation effectiveness and the different practices and strategies around improving our labour efficiency. So what work we've done, we've really pinned it down to 5 key areas where we've the potential to improve efficiency. Firstly, we're talking about our farm system. So in that sense, we're looking at a simple pasture-based, grass-based system that can operate, I suppose, that's repeatable and can be operated by anyone. Looking at it from the point of view of if the farmer is to get sick or if something is to happen, is there opportunity for someone else to step in? Secondly, we're looking at the practices and the technologies and the facilities, I suppose, in there as well, in terms of, like, we know most of them, the different actions that we can take to reduce time use. Then we've got our outsourcing, so really focused on the contractor in spring, around our first round of fertiliser and the slurry especially. And thirdly, or finally, what I'm going to focus on is around work organisation, and I'll touch on that in the next slide. But I suppose in terms of the initial gains we can make, there's absolutely massive opportunity here in terms of how we structure and the simple things we can do to potentially save time on our farms. So what I've done here in terms of highlighting that work organisation piece, and I could have picked any 2 farms within the study to highlight this, but these are 2 examples that I've chosen. So really just looking, this farm, Farmer A, is just highlighting for us the structure of a typical working day on a farm that we would have found with effective work organisation. So what we saw from that structure, like a start time of 6:45, finish time structured and early at 5 o'clock at that time of year. And through the day, I suppose we've our milking time early, and we're finishing with milking, and we've significant, I suppose, periods of breaks and a couple of tasks during that day. Whereas if we take Farmer B here, which was at the other end of the spectrum, I guess. Like you're talking about an earlier finish time or start time and a significantly later finish time in terms of what's going on that farm. And like when we do look at that, there's multiple breaks during the day, there's multiple, I suppose, grassland management tasks, and then after milking, the farmer is going back out to do more work. I suppose these farms, they're similar herd size, they're similar location, land type isn't an issue. Fair enough. One farmer is at a later stage in the development of that farm, but it's highlighting, I suppose, the steps we can take, and there will be days we can all relate to Farmer B, but I suppose it's trying to set up the systems and the structures and everything else that we can avoid it as much as we can. So what we are seeing from these farms is the shorter working day, the shorter working week, and then completing fewer tasks per day within that. So completing fewer tasks and focusing then on finishing them tasks. So like really then if we picture it and like to contextualize that it's not just a time thing or it's not just a work-life balance thing where I suppose the benefits in this are. If we take, I suppose, Farmer B is our example here in terms of our normal farm on the left, and I'd say most of us are able to relate to this in some way of days where we're going around and moving around, not maybe taking time to analyse where we're at or what we're doing, and I suppose the impact then that's going to have on other areas of our farm, whether that's in terms of cases of mastitis, whether it's in terms of cell count, whether it's in terms of a 6-week calving rate. But I suppose ultimately we're all trying to get to the point where we can be somewhat like this lean farm where it's a structured, simple system that anyone can operate. I suppose it is important when we do look at this that there is the role of the differences that are down to the personality and the person within this, and it's not simple for everyone obviously to adapt and to follow this template, and there is a time and an upskilling part in it. So it is important to acknowledge that, but I suppose throughout all this, what I'd be recommending is that it's just a step-by-step approach. It's is there one or is there things that we can do different to make, I suppose, our farms that bit more attractive for both people coming in and for maybe a son or a daughter or whoever that is that might eventually take it over. I suppose then the other key area that we would have looked at, and over 100 farmers were involved in this work in the past 2 years, focusing on where the pinch points are on different farms in spring, and I suppose highlighting the key issues that exist. The first one and the biggest one that comes up every year, and it's absolutely essential. It's probably moving on in the year to get our team together, but hopefully there's another couple of weeks to try and organise it where we see the need. But planning that spring team as soon as possible is absolutely key. And I suppose making sure that people are there rather than looking for them is essential. So the big thing that farmers are coming back to us saying is that being proactive and being flexible around the different people who are working on the farm is massive. So reaching out to the different, whether it's the GA club, whether it's the men's shed, whether it's a stay-at-home parent or whoever it is, if there's that scope, and there's plenty of people willing to do it, but whether it might be 2 hours a week, whether it might be 3 days a week, but flexible and being proactive around the people that we're employing on our farms is absolutely massive. The other big thing is the contractors, which I've outlined in that sense. The second thing is around the calf management, and I think I can bring the animal health aspect in here as well. 2 key areas, so like doing what we can to I suppose avoid sick animals, to avoid all the challenges that we know will arise when I suppose something goes wrong. The big thing around both of these is really again, it's back to that workforce planning piece. So having the people there that were in a position to implement the excellent calf health management. Like there's no point in trying to do your 1, 2, 3s for colostrum and all the different practices. I suppose if you're not getting in and having your own dinner, or if you're not getting in and doing, or you're not getting a night's sleep, it's going to be much more difficult to implement all of these things. Fourthly then was around the work organisation. So actually, I suppose where possible, having as much of a plan for the day as we can, so that you're not going from A to B and just running around all day. So like having simple systems. So basically where I suppose we know we're milking in the morning, then we're feeding our calves, we're taking our break, but having the key jobs lined up throughout the day that I suppose everyone knows what's going on and that there's proactive planning around that. And the other big thing is having all the equipment and gear that we need for the spring ready to go and everything that way. Finally then, in terms of that piece is really around the weather, and obviously that's not something we can control ourselves, but again it relates back to that workforce planning, having the people there and being in a position to control the controllables in that sense. And the other big one that kept coming up among these groups of farmers was maintaining the personal outlets where possible there during the spring. So like stay going to whatever hobbies or whatever you're into for that period, to just get a bit of time away from the farm, to rethink, to allow yourself that bit of a break and talk to people and that type of stuff. So finally then, looking at the workplace culture aspect and the impact that we found of I suppose what these steps were having out on farm. So this was a survey we did a few years ago, over 300 respondents, so a good indicator of I suppose the attitudes and the perspectives of the sector. And what we found was the top 25% of farms in terms of their work setup, in terms of work organisation, they were having less difficulties in terms of recruiting people, in terms of retaining people, and in terms of managing them. So I suppose it's highlighting that the steps that them farmers were taking in terms of reducing the workload and improving work-life balance, they were having a positive effect in terms of the people who were working on the farm, and they were staying around, and they were coming because these farms obviously had good reputations. I suppose on the other side of it then, looking at the outlook and the perspectives of these farmers and looking at would they encourage young people to farm? Do they think it offers an effective work-life balance? And I suppose being positive in terms of their outlook. And what that, again, the results were really powerful in terms of the farms that are better set up and are working less hours and taking that bit more time off and so on, that they're much more positive in terms of these attributes. So it's highlighting, I suppose, that this work or that these steps are having a positive effect. Finally then, in terms of looking at the farm key performance indicators and what impact they were having in terms of the labour efficiency effect. And what we found was these farms did higher 6-week calving rates, they did higher EBIs, so I suppose operating the simple grass-based type system and looking to maximise their key performance indicators, and also the profitability effect. So like the most profitable farms were in that top 25% for labour efficiency, and that's before labour efficiency is being accounted for. So again, showing the positive effects of improved efficiency and I suppose the ability to achieve high levels of farm performance. So in terms of our take-home messages, and I suppose what we're looking for. So good work-life balance in the farm, it can be done, is what the data is telling us, it's what the signals are there, and I suppose for us as farmers it's about being positive about that and the opportunities that are being there, taking a step-by-step approach to maybe slowly implement the couple of things that we know we can do in terms of improving that work-life balance. I suppose the key to it all really is around good people, so placing good people around you in terms of whether that's part-time staff, full-time staff, or whether it's your family members working on the farm, but good people, good advice, and then making good investments in terms of the key facilities, the technologies and so on. And finally, I suppose, as a sector, and Kevin mentioned it earlier around the positivity of the sector and highlighting that, and I suppose showing what we have, and I suppose showing what can be achieved on our farms in terms of work hours, importantly I think in terms of the flexibility aspect, to I suppose show what can be done and to also address the negative perceptions associated with dairy farming careers and improving that image. So I'd like to thank you for listening, and I'll hand it back over to Fiona now.